Looks like it's about 5 past. Shall we begin? All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. So our chair today, Erica McAlpin, actually is unable to be with us. So I'm wondering if we can get a volunteer from the committee to just welcome us and call the meeting to order, and then to adjourn us at the end of the meeting.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Youth Development Council's Equity and Disparity Committee. Call the meeting to order, and I will pass the baton on to Jared.
Thank you very much. And I will pass it to Melissa for roll call.
Thank you, Jared. Also, just a reminder to everyone that we are recording this as it's a public meeting. And let me get our roll call up and running. Bear with me just a minute. Andy Santana May. Koi Vu. Robin Johnson. Celeste Jansen.
Present.
Zan Ojero.
Present.
Let's see. Erica McAlpin. Janine Hartley. And Jeff Parker.
Present.
Just looking to see if that's everyone else. I think that's it. Thank you. And then we do have someone on the phone. I'm not sure who that is, but if you are able to pipe up now and let us know your name and your organization and whether you would like to participate in the public comment section, which is scheduled for approximately 12:55 p.m. That would be great. I'll give you a moment if you can unmute. Otherwise, Jared, back to you.
All right. All right. Well, it looks like we can continue then. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I think we've got some different members here than were here last time. So we'll start off really just with a brief synopsis of what we covered in the last meeting, just to catch you up to speed. And Melissa, I don't know if you're able to share the PowerPoint. All right, thank you so much. All right. Okay, great. All right, so really, last meeting was May 27th, and oops, we're able to go back. Yep. Perfect. Oh, yes, thank you. So really what we did at that meeting was we discussed what a purpose statement might look like for this committee. And so we brought a couple examples of a purpose statement and the committee reviewed. And this is the purpose statement that was chosen, which says the Youth Development Council, Equity and Disparity Committee provides perspective, strategies, and recommendations to the YDC on inequities and disparities in youth serving systems and programs. The committee is focused on identifying, addressing, and eliminating disparities and inequities at the individual and systemic levels to ensure that Oregon's youth, regardless of identity or background, thrive in their chosen educational or career paths, and that the systems that serve them are equitable, unbiased, and just. And then we talked a bit about the concept of targeted universalism and what that looks like, how we can incorporate that into our work. And that concept really is thinking about how we target groups that have been historically underrepresented and marginalized to ensure that universally we are achieving full potential. So that was an interesting discussion. This is really the outcome of that meeting, was this purpose statement. And I'm wondering if anybody who was present last time would have anything to add, or if any members who weren't with us last time have any comments or questions about that.
Hey, Jared, this is Jeff. I'll just chime in real quick. I think this is awesome, and I read it in the notes from the last meeting. And I am the last one to try to wordsmith stuff in a big group. So everyone who put the work into this, I'm super grateful. But my one comment though is that the perspective, strategy, and recommendations to the YDC should be on eliminating inequity and disparities in youth serving systems and programs. Right now, we're recommending to the YDC on inequity and disparities. And so that part just reads wrong to me. Like the purpose is to try to eliminate those, if I got it right. And if I'm just reading it wrong, please, forgive. But I think it is super solid. But that's the one piece that grabs my attention.
That's great feedback. Thank you. That is a good point. I think reading it that way, it certainly can be taken that way. Yes. Would everybody here be all right if we add that word eliminating inequity and disparities?
I think it's in there in the second sentence. The committee is focused on identifying, addressing, and eliminating disparities and inequities.
Yep. And so, Jeff, you're talking about the first sentence here. The YDC, the Equity and Disparity Committee, provides perspective, strategies, and recommendations to the YDC on inequity and disparities.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I am, but maybe that's fine that it's in the second sentence. Yeah, and just leave it there. Again, please forgive it caught me, so I wanted to put it out there.
No, yeah, absolutely. All right. Any comments there? Shall we leave as is? Anybody want to change anything there?
I think it reads fine as is. I read it almost like the first sentence is recognizing and talking about them. And then the second sentence is about that elimination.
Great. All right. Any other comments on that? So Jeff, if that makes sense to you, I think it sounds like we.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. Perfect. All right. So at the end of last meeting, we discussed next steps, and we thought that a good next step would be then to focus on an equity statement in addition to the purpose statement. Really just describing what equity means to us, what the goals would be in achieving equity, and really how we move that forward. So in that vein, if we could move to the next slide, please.
Sure. And as I do that, I'm just going to let you know that I think that we have on the phone Robin Johnson. We had a little technical difficulties, but Robin, it looks like you're unmuted now. If you just want to try speaking.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes. Welcome.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have anything to add so far, Robin, since we've had you muted this whole time? So sorry.
No, I just wanted to make sure I was registered at roll call, and whenever I unmuted my phone and realized you all weren't hearing me. So I just wanted to let you know I'm here, I'm on the phone. I don't have anything to offer at this time, but now I can manage the mute unmute from my phone instead of the Zoom app muting me.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Robin. All right, so we decided to bring a few questions to the committee as we think about developing an equity statement. These are 3 questions that we thought we could discuss as a group. And so we can take them any order if anyone wants to jump in. Number 1, how can we identify specific disparities that we as the YDC and YDD can and are able to reduce? How do we know if and when we have achieved equity, and what does success look like? And how can we think of equity as it relates to justice? So I'll give you a couple minutes. Feel free to think about that, and feel free to jump in with any of those questions if you have thoughts about that, and how we can all work together with thinking about these questions and moving toward developing one solid equity statement. Actually, I'd say why don't we go in order of the questions? Why don't we start with number one first? How can we identify specific disparities that we are able to reduce?
I can get us started by just sharing some thoughts. These are big questions, every single one of them. It strikes me that Oregonians are living in multiple, like experiencing multiple systems, and that all of those systems have racial equity history and challenges and things that are in progress, and our work is really in some ways interdisciplinary. We work with education systems, we work with prevention, maybe mental health systems, public health, and juvenile justice. And so it strikes me that some of what you're asking here is about what does it look like in each of those kind of systems. And I guess the question of what we're able to do is a good one, and it probably has to do with both the allocation of resources and policies. I don't know. I'll just pause there and see what other folks have to say.
Celeste, I'd like to take that a step further and say that for some of what we do, we have the data tools. JGIS is very specific and allows us to do that with the juvenile juvenile justice work. But when it comes to re-engagement or workforce, I think then we have to ask all of the nonprofits that work with us, that we fund, to help us to provide information. And I don't know exactly where we are with all of that now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we do get our data reports from them quarterly. So we do have some good data that obviously would need cleanup at the end of the year and at the end of the biennium before we are able to really have a solid analysis of that. But yeah.
I remember years ago, we had someone look at our juvenile justice data and talk about, it was like 7 different places, 7 different times in which decisions were made, that there were moments in time where there were particular disparities. And for us in our state, there were 2 in particular where there were times where there was overrepresentation for African American and Native American men at different stages. Like there was really good high level, system level data for the juvenile justice system. I also think about the burden, like as we're more culturally responsive and we are working more with communities of color to provide services, asking them to kind of prove that there's injustice in the world using the data that's out there just feels to me like a burden that I don't feel great about placing on nonprofit partners. I recognize that there's some data that they have to give as a part of grant management. But to me, it's not necessarily about like proving that there's disparity out there. It's that us as a system recognizing that in all of the systems that we partner, there is and has been and will continue to be disparity.
Absolutely. Great point. Does anybody else have anything on number 1?
So I think that last comment, comment sort of starts to get into number 2, which is, how do we know when we've achieved equity? Like what does success look like? And part of that is when the data sets start to even out, or the data sets are representative of the demographics. And that feels almost hard to say, if you know, but it is true. Like we're not gonna hit 100%, right? We're not gonna find solutions for every young person, but the solutions that we find and the successes we have should be equally representative across every racial, ethnic, and demographic section that we review or that we have data on. And so you know, I kind of like the idea that a good compromise is when everyone is equally unsatisfied. And I think that's really what we're looking at here. And, you know, of course, we would love to make sure that every barrier and every equity is a part of every young person's experience. But we've all been in this business long enough to know that that's an unrealistic expectation. But the data should match the demographics.
Yeah, getting into number 2, I just, I mean, a lot of like the wealth gap that we see in our country has roots in the system of slavery that was 200 years ago. And I just feel less, I agree, we should see no disparities on number 2. And I just don't think that in the next 2 years or 3 years or 4 years that this is something we're really going to look at externally. I guess all of these questions I think about, we're swimming in multiple systems that are not fair and have a lot of inequity built in. I guess for me, the questions are, how can we do the most with our resources to combat that and to make sure that we don't replicate that? So externally, I don't know that anything will change. And, you know, we are all hoping and working to make it change. But I guess with us, with our money, the questions then are, how are we delivering resources and support? What does our services look like? I guess that's where I would probably take all of these.
Yeah, these are great points. Anyone else have
So
thoughts?
I have a follow-up question for Celeste. Given that, like when we get back to question number 1, then if there's multiple systems with multiple inequities across those systems, where do we start, right? Or how do we identify which ones to prioritize in that case? Maybe is the question. So there's no disagreement that they exist and that they're across sectors, but given our resources, how do we identify which of the disparities, which, you know, or to target or tackle?
Well,
Go ahead, Zan, please.
it seems to me that the juvenile justice system is a real clear one where we have data and we've already begun there. And we certainly don't want to start youth out with any kind of a record that they have to then dig themselves out of later. And so that seems to me a clear starting point. But I would also say the re-engagement work is really critical. And I don't know what it means in that arena.
Yeah, thanks, Zan. I agree. I think that going back to just sort of the mission of the YDC, it's when we're doing grants that are connected to juvenile justice. There are how we apply the funding, or it is how our partners do the work, both of those equity matters. And it seems like both of those are two instances where we want to think about it. So I think of it as like multiple layers. And so we have decision points about how we allocate resources sometimes, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's county by county, but then it's how the work is done. So I guess thinking about it both ways.
Hey, everybody, this is Cord Bucher. Good afternoon. I think that something that what I see as a big challenge here is that when we measure the disparities and we identify them or talk about them, we're really talking about state level or even national disparity. These are things that we can look at a state level, high school completion rate, for example, and see disparities, but then our programs we fund and the way we measure them are really on an individual organizational level. So we're kind of looking at the problem on this real macro scale, but then we're measuring our success as the council or the agency. We're measuring the success of individual organizations or programs and moving the dial in the specific work they're doing. And I don't think that's not a bad thing. I think that it's probably the best model for the resources that we have is to be responsive to community identified needs. But I feel like it really kind of creates a big disconnection between, to even eradicate one disparity we might know of at a state level would require a lot of concentrated resources and work, which is different from how we are allocating them through a competitive grant process and really putting those resources out in different communities to address different kinds of needs for different youth. So it's not to say that we can't measure success, but I think that that's a little bit of the disconnection that I see. And part of why we do, I think, Celeste, I think you make a great point that putting the burden on grant applicants, on our grantees to tell us, that there are problems when we know they are there, I don't feel great about. But I also think that part of why we have done that is to try to let them tell us like what they're trying to fix, what they see as the most important issue for their work to address, and then to be measured on that basis, because that really gets at what they are trying to do. So, I think that's kind of the zoom in, zoom out that I see, in grant management.
Or your comments make me think a lot about leading indicators and lagging indicators, and that that there are some measurements that are easy to measure and hard to change, and there are other ones that are hard to measure and easier to change and are shorter term. And so it's important for us to be real about that when we think about measurement and have a theory of action that connects them so we know what we're doing and why. I wanted to offer one solution, or not solution, but one idea. We went through at Education Northwest and worked on developing an equity lens. And the way that we did it, we looked around and created a bank of questions. There are a lot of agencies that have done some really nice work, and school districts that have done some really nice work on creating equity focus statements or equity lenses. And so we did that, and then we went through and thought about our purpose, and then we matched some of the comments with our purpose, and then we went through and had like an iterative process of engagement to make sure that what we ended with, we were really happy with. And I'm wondering, it feels like there are multiple ways that we could think about this equity statement. And some of it is how we work as a council, how we work as a division, and then it's how we manage our grants and how we partner with others, with exterior partners or partner agencies. So maybe what we're looking for is to develop a statement that specifies like the levels or the ways in which we want to think about equity. I don't know, does that resonate with anyone?
I'm having trouble thinking abstractions today with my COVID brain. So I think it sounds like a starting point.
Yeah, Celeste, I'm wondering if you could restate that, because I'm 100% with you, I think, but I just want to make sure I have a full understanding of what you just said.
I was just I was thinking that some of our work with the YDC has to do with our policy work. And so for the policy, the way in which an equity statement would read when we put our policy hats on would be more about system outcomes, the juvenile justice system, the education system, our role in funding partners that work that way. So that's kind of the exterior system policy part of a statement. But if we want to just, equity work starts internal, and it starts with each of us, and it starts with us looking at our own systems. So there's also that aspect of an equity statement, that it's sort of like, how are we granting? Who are we granting to? How are we thinking about our allocation of resources, our representation? So that's another way that we think about equity. And then a third way is really, so much of what happens with the YDC is the work of the grantees. So us learning from them, shaping that work, supporting that work is another way. It's kind of, we look out to the system world, we look internal, or we look at our grantees. So it's hard to come up with one equity statement that says all of that. If we just focus in on the policy side, for example, we miss the other sides that are really important to us. So I think an equity statement that we create for the YDC would really need to, just recognize that we are working on a policy level, on a grant management level, and internally. And those are the three areas that I'm thinking I might be missing something.
Celeste, I think that's wonderful, and Zan, thanks for putting that in the chat. So what my mind goes to, and hopefully we're in sync here, is that really what this might want to include is the idea that our policy recommendations, our grant making ecosystems are all in alignment with direct feedback from practitioners in the field. Like, to bring those three things together is that we will recommend upwards and we will grant money externally based on the needs of the communities, and the best resource we have for the needs from the communities are the grantees and the practitioners who are doing the work every day with the people that we're trying to have an impact on. I don't know if I hit that, but that's what I just took away from your discussion.
Yeah, I think that is fantastic. Does anybody have more thoughts on that? Feels like we're getting there. We're getting to a framework.
This is Cord Bucher from YDD again. I'll just quickly say that the community engagement work that the division and hopefully folks from the council as well, will be doing over the next few months, really culminating in some work this late summer and fall. Those conversations are, I think, going to be centered around community investment grant funding, and grant funds are a big driver of this work. But I think that there's an opportunity in those engagements to find a way to talk about this, to really get that feedback from service providers and community members.
I like that. That makes sense. Jeff, when you said that, the one thing that was missing for me is youth. Like, just, I think always trying to integrate our services around youth voice, youth perspective. And so stopping around provider perspective moves us in that direction, but it doesn't go as far as I'd like it to go.
That's a good point, Celeste.
And I think you're all also hitting on number 3. You know, how can we think of equity as it relates to justice? And you know, it's just so intertwined. But does anyone have any thoughts there?
I just threw something up in the chat. I don't know if everyone has access to the chat, but just to try to get the framework that I was thinking of. And then I do appreciate the idea that, yeah, our work needs to be informed by youth, not just the practitioner, for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Looks so is this sort of kind of getting to what an equity statement could look like? What's in the chat there?
I don't know if that's it, but it's certainly, I'm hoping to capture some of the sentiments that we're sharing.
I think our statement should begin with a recognition of injustice, or historical injustice, or, you know, we might want to use different language. I'm not sure what we want to say, but I just think it's important to start off with that, because I think that's not always understood, and then go on to say, because of that injustice, we are utilizing equity to work to build a more just society. But so I think we're moving in the right direction, but I see an equity statement as having probably like multiple components to it. And the first one is more kind of backwards facing. And then there being something about action so that it builds towards a future.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
So Celeste, you're thinking about something along the lines of, given the racist history of Oregon as was embedded in our original Constitution, and the successive waves of exploited labor that came through the state to build our economy, whether it's the Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Latinx community, we feel the need to address those injustices for our youth moving forward. We will do that through at the YDC by addressing systemic policy issues as we can from our purview in youth programs, by working with our grant dollars and grantees and youth to achieve more equitable outcomes, something like that.
I'm glad we recorded this. Sam, that was great. That sounds like something that I think we could shape up and present to the council and could get us to that direction, because I think it honors the work that we do. Robin, we haven't heard from you, and as chair, I just want to really make sure that your voice is included. What's your thoughts on all of this? I don't know if it's easy to talk right now.
Hi, thank you for that. I'm actually not able to see any of the slides, and I missed the last meeting. So I feel like I'm in a little bit of a listening space and just taking in just really the really great conversation that's happening here.
Great. Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of progress here. So I don't know if we probably can't fully craft the exact statement today, but it feels like next meeting we could probably have that complete. Is that how are people feeling about that? We had a little bit of a homework assignment, but it might not. I think we're probably closer than we might have thought that we would be at the end of this. I guess, does anyone have any final thoughts on any of these three questions?
I think in terms of question 3, it's hard to think about there being justice without equity.
Yeah, Zan, that was where I was thinking too. I mean, justice is the outcome, right? Justice is the success that we're looking for through this process. And so as Celeste was saying, if we bookended this statement with injustice at the beginning and justice at the end, then our work is sandwiched in the middle.
And I'd like to acknowledge the input from our visitor, Greg Haycock, as well. Thank you, Melissa, for including his notes in the chat. And since Robin, I don't think you can see that, maybe Melissa could read it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam, for that. And thank you, Greg, for contributing that. Greg is from the Oregon Public Education Network and shared in the chat, empowering youth must provide opportunities for developing individual agency of those involved. In education, our state uses a top-down approach in measuring success. Developing opportunities for young people to work with support from leaders and developing skills to serve the needs of their communities would be a good beginning.
I think I could add to that as well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Basically, what I see in various areas, let's take healthcare for one. There are people who in underserved communities that would benefit by having those services presented by youth who are in those communities, learning the skills to reach out and be inclusive. That could be with healthcare, whether it's in Warm Springs, whether it's in Latino community where people are afraid to go into receive the services needed. There's a whole kind of developing of low-level, it's low-level skill in a sense that if you're going out to someone's home and you're checking on their medical care, you're seeing that they're taking their pills, certain kinds of things, anything that gives you an income and brings you into communication with the community where you have some authority, you have some agency, you're doing something meaningful, all of these things would be useful. And I see that there's so many agencies here coming from different directions, so I know that my comments don't necessarily serve everyone. But I've also worked with the Oregon Battle of the Books, getting the people, the incarcerated high school students involved, and even there they've been isolated from the rest of the other high school students in order to compete. It's we've got to tear down those walls. If we want them to be included, we need to find ways of getting them outside of, without compromising their own safety and identity that way. But at the same time, you have to bring them together with other people. And so I find all the focus on just, talking about injustice, we understand that already. It's about developing the skills and breaking through the barriers that seems most important to me. So you should go on with your meeting, but that's my contribution to this. I know that I'm not one of those people receiving any funding for anything. So, but those who do, I find that you really need to serve people by putting them in contact with other people and giving them some power.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That's great. Any other thoughts?
Jared, this is Melissa. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I have one other comment from another guest, Lisa Brown, who is not able to stay through to the end of the public comments. If I can, if I can just read that. As one member said, youth voice should be represented. Then my question is, are there youth voices present in these meetings? I'm new, so maybe this is not the right place. And Jared, you want to take that and respond to that?
Sure. So I believe we have a youth member on this committee. Is that's correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Andy Santana May is not able to attend today, but he is on the committee.
Yeah. So we do have youth voice. He was present last meeting, and so we are grateful that we have that input. Yeah, and looking for more any opportunity we have and we can have to solicit youth feedback and voice.
And as a note for the council, it's a requirement of us being a state advisory group that we have at least 1/5 of the council is made up of youth members. And as Jared just commented, we are always looking to add more youth members, which by the definition of what we're adhering to is age 28 or younger when they join the council.
Wonderful. Well, we've got so it's 12:47, about a little under 10 minutes to move into public comment. Does anyone have any other thoughts on this?
This is Robin. Are you all able to hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Sorry. I think I was muted again. I wanted to kind of to the point that was made earlier. I'm sorry to the gentleman, I didn't catch your name, who shared about having youth voice be delivering the message. And then I think also to the other question that was asked about youth representation. The thought that's coming to me, and again, I don't know if it fits in these statements, but oftentimes in my work around equity and justice is that there are folks who are, the ones coming from community are experiencing the disparities that we're addressing, are ready to speak, truth to power. And yet those in positions of power oftentimes are navigating their own biases that make it hard for them to receive the messages, the data, what have you. So I'm wondering on the other side of thinking about empowering, driving crazy. When it comes to thinking about empowering youth voice, I also wonder about that other side of the coin of, is there a role for us to play in supporting folks in positions of power to understand and unpack their biases so they're more ready to receive the messages that youth and us as an entity have to deliver. And again, maybe that doesn't live in these statements and this is not the time to add that portion, but I wonder if there's a role, a scaffolding role, again, we can play for folks who are in positions of power, decision-making power, what have you, to be receptive to the work that we're up to and the youth voices delivering those messages. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Robin. That's great. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think that's just such an important part of equity work, and it's really unfair to say we want to just have youth adapt to a racist system without also trying to work on a system to become less racist. So I really like that. I think that there is always opportunity to grow. And if we put on a continuous improvement lens, that means every one of us and all of our jobs and the way that we give money, you know, the way the council is finding ways to be more open to hear feedback when it does come is really important part of the work. So I like that. And I would love if we could acknowledge some sentiment like that in it. I always get nervous when it's like, when it just focuses on youth doing the work, because that's just exhausting and not fair. You know, that's not what we want to set up.
Thanks, Celeste. Anybody else? Any comments, thoughts?
Hey, Jared, as we're running out of time here, can you frame up what you think the next steps are to move this process forward?
Yes, indeed. Well, Melissa, if you wouldn't mind, yeah, there we are. Next slide. So we did think just, you know, a little homework assignment. So next meeting, we thought we'll just draft this equity statement, and I think we're close there. We've got good headway on this. We were thinking that the committee could think about how we incorporate the questions we discussed today into an equity statement, which I think we have done. And then next time to please bring an example of an equity statement from a business or an organization that you admire, or an equity statement that you think is inadequate, that you've seen that could be improved. So we know what not to do, how we make our equity statement better and incorporate the best of other equity statements and improve upon things that can be improved upon. I think we're pretty close. Bill and I maybe can put our heads together and kind of take all of these thoughts and sort of coalesce them into the statement. I think Zan, you know, we're close with that, and I think next meeting we can just sort of put our heads together and wordsmith and have that final equity statement drafted. Does that sound reasonable to folks?
Sounds good.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Bill, Melissa, do you have anything to add to that? Let's see.
Thanks. I just put some final parting comments from our guests who had to leave earlier in the chat, but that's it.
Thank you.
Nothing else to add. Thank you.
All right. Okay, and they've already been read out loud, so that's great. Perfect. All right, so those would be the next steps. Next meeting is Melissa, can you help me with that? Do we know? Let's see.
It's the we're meeting on the last Fridays of each month, so we are July. I think it's the 29th, but let me just
29th. Yep, July 29th at noon. Perfect. All right, and we are at 12:54. One more minute, and then yeah, I guess we can move into public comment if there's anyone else from the public who has public comments. I guess before we move into that, do any of the committee members have any final thoughts, questions, concerns, comments?
I think that whatever we come up with as a committee, we should bring back out the larger council and get feedback on it. Because there are just a few voices here, and it always, more voices mean better work. So that would just be my recommendation. I wouldn't want to think about next time as drafting the final. I would think about it as coming up with something drafty to share. And I don't think that there's any members of the public on the call anymore. It's just us. So.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, if there's nothing else and if there are no other comments, would someone volunteer to adjourn the meeting?
Since I opened it, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. This was a good discussion.
Great. Thank you all.
That it was productive as it could be with 50% of the council members on the meeting having COVID. So thank you both, Jeff and Stan, for participating right now.
Yes, I hope you both feel better and everyone and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
I'm humbled by the dedication. I hope everyone takes care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.